The Baltimore Ravens, the last team on our AFC North coverage, and we saved the best for last because they literally did the best, arguably, of the entire draft, starting with and headlined by Kyle Hamilton, a steal in round one, Tyler Linderbaum, another steal in round one, and then in round two, getting David Ojabo, who we have talked so highly of on this show as a potential steal for somebody who is willing to take the risk on his injury. And Aaron, is it even a risk selecting David Ojabo at this point?
No. I mean, especially where they got him. Like, we're talking about a guy that's hungry. And we talk a lot about stories in sports. When you get somebody that's motivated and you mix that with some talent and you put them in a good situation, I feel like the risk now is even less than it was before the draft, right? Maybe he gets drafted by a team that, who's a shit franchise?
The Jaguars.
The Jaguars? No, I was just playing. But yeah, a shit franchise that doesn't have a culture that's built into that foundation. Baltimore's so different. When you go to Baltimore, it's a different foundation. He's a defensive player. They are going to set him up for success. I have zero concerns about Ojabo. I think this is one of the big steals of the draft. Even, it being only a second round pick, this guy could have easily been a top 15, top 20 pick in the first round. Had he not got injured on his pro day. So yes, experience is lacking, all these things, but all of those things aside that people want the negatives, he was highly, highly productive. He jumps off the tape. This is a guy I think is going to fit perfectly with the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm looking over everything, and we have the graphics already made of what my GPA says for the Ravens. And we did it earlier on. We did I believe it was the Bengals. I gave the Bengals a 3 point, a very high score. The Browns, I gave the Browns a 3.4, and I'm like, how do I lower the Browns so I can make the Ravens better? And I was like, it just hit me. I just need to raise what I have for the Ravens. Like, looking up and down their draft board, like, I gave the Isaiah Likely pick a C because they had already taken Charlie Kolar earlier in round 4. But even the Isaiah Likely pick is a great pick because he's such a, like, you would look at the pre-draft rankings for everybody and you're like, who could be the steals at the tight end position? Both those players, and Charlie Kolar and Isaiah Likely, were there as potential steals of the draft, and the Ravens got both of them. Like, I just got to bump up all of my grades for the Ravens here because, like, as I look at it and read more, I'm like, dude, I don't think there was a bad pick or an average pick from the Baltimore Ravens in this draft. AJ, what are your thoughts on what they did throughout the entire all 7 rounds?
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about some other teams that had great drafts, but to me, and it could be early, it's our second conversation of a division, but to me, this was the best draft in the NFL. The Ravens do it again and again and again. Their bread and butter since at least 2000 has been defense. And Kyle Hamilton, number 1. You draft Tyler Linderbaum, who I talked about going to the Ravens as a great pick to help that run game. Then they go right back to defense, stealing David Ojabo, comes from good stock, in family, played for Harbaugh's brother at Michigan. Love that kid, knows all about him. Then they get Travis Jones in the 3rd round, a guy that we talked about in the 1st, who as a D tackle is going to wreak havoc. And again, we talk about a defensive team drafting and developing these defensive players. They are going to be dangerous. And you can even call this an overreaction to, they had 17 players on IR when the season ended last year, and a lot of them were on the defensive side of the ball. That happens this year. Guess what? They've got depth. And then to bring up the tight end conversation that you had, they also just traded Marquise Brown to the Cardinals. It seems to me like they wanted to force a wide receiver into this AFC because that's what's going on. Now it looks like they want to get back to who they are, a run-heavy team that can destroy the middle of the field when they are passing the ball, and every now and then let Rashad Bateman go up and go get it down the field or in the end zone. So I love the Charlie Kolar pick. I love the Isaiah Likely pick. Tyler Batty coming in. I know it's Beatty, but you can't not call him Batty. With their last pick, talk about value for a good running back. Just up and down the way. Their first 6 picks, I could fall in love with.
You like all these guys were I guess our pre-draft, like they're throughout. I would consider just about every player that we mentioned as someone should go up and get this player as a pre-draft darling for the Sack City podcast. And literally Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, David Ojabo, Travis Jones wasn't mentioned, but that guy was arguably a first round pick for a lot of people. And then you go your boy, Daniel Falale out of Minnesota. We talked about him. Jalen Armour-Davis, who in our last show we talked, it's just darling after darling after darling for this Baltimore Ravens team. And
I don't remember who it was. Somebody, I was watching ESPN, and it was their top 75. The Ravens got 8 players out of their top 75. Like, that's nuts.
Well, I mean, if you look at the list and you really kind of break it down a little bit closer, they arguably got the best player or a top 3 player at the position, first of all, in their first 4 picks, right? Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, David Ojabo, who knows? I had him number 4 on my edge rushers. That's a top 5 guy at the position, more than likely. Travis Jones could easily be the second best defensive tackle, maybe the third best if you can include Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt. Again, all first-round projected picks. But I'm not going to let you guys do this. I'm not just going to blow the smoke and allow us to be like, oh, praise the Baltimore Ravens. They're so great. They had a great draft. They did. They had a great draft. You see my grade 3.1. I thought they had a good draft. I want to point out some of the things that I felt like you guys were reaching on a little bit. First of all, the Daniel Falale pick. Good. Again, where they get him, it's not a bad pick. Maybe he could have gone a little bit higher, but there's some inconsistencies there. He still has a lot. He has a wide base at times and oversets against rushers. He needs to have better control when people are coming right at him. And sometimes his pad level gets way too high. He is going to be inconsistent in the NFL. To me, that is a depth piece on the offensive line for the Baltimore Ravens. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad pick, but we get guys that fall in love with them because the Baltimore Ravens picked him, and you guys gave it an A. And I'm like, that's not an A pick. That's not an A pick. He has some potential, but he has so many inconsistencies. That's not an A pick. The Jalen Armour-Davis pick, I said I love Jalen Armour-Davis. However, the man hasn't played very much football. He's always hurt. He missed 2018. 2020, he missed a couple of games. There is going to be a problem with his longevity if he can't stay on the field. He's not a huge guy, 6 foot, almost 200 pounds, runs a 4.3. Athletically, gifted. But can he stay on the football field is the problem. There were a lot of times he was on the sideline or he wasn't in the game because of injuries. In the NFL, those things matter. So, yes, they're good picks, players with upside, but those are the reasons these players dropped to round 4 through 7. So I didn't give him A's. I gave the Jalen Armour-Davis a B+ because of his potential. I think Daniel Falale has a lot of work to do before he's a consistent every down player in the NFL. And then you mentioned the tight ends. I think the tight ends, great for what the Baltimore Ravens do, and they fit in. But let's be honest, Mark Andrews the guy. We saw when they had a Hayden Hurst. We saw what they did with other tight ends, and those tight ends, guess where they're at now? On other teams. So are these guys going to come in and supplant Mark Andrews? No. So those picks for depth are great, but what kind of impact are they going to have for that team on a consistent basis? I question that. I like the picks. They're good players, but they're not supplanting Mark Andrews. And I know the Ravens run 2 tight end sets, but let's be honest, they had 2 tight ends every year, and there's 1 tight end that's consistently talked about, and that's Mark Andrews. Again, I've got to play the devil's advocate. I am not knocking it. By the way, I do love the Tyler Beatty pick. In a backfield that loves to run the football, injuries are bound to happen. You get a J.K. Dobbins, a Gus Edwards back, but you don't know how they're going to come back immediately. Tyler Beatty is going to be a game changer, and he can be a game changer if he gets a little bit of run in that offense. So that's just my thoughts. I do agree with AJ. I think Baltimore is arguably the best draft in the entire league. I have one team that I have ahead of them just off the top of my head, but there's not many, if any.
Yep. Now let's take a look at the overall AFC North now that we have kind of had this come to a close. Overall, this is everyone's GPAs combined and a lot of math here. It's tight. It's really tight. The Bengals at the worst because, well, you know, Bengals fans kind of did that one to yourself. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
True.
3.2. The Steelers at 3.25 and the Ravens properly at 3.3. I'm kind of surprised here that the Kenny Pickett selection didn't bump the Steelers down any further, or just a half a decimal or a 0.05 below a team that we praised in the Baltimore Ravens. But it just goes to show what the Steelers did outside of the Kenny Pickett mess up. And
when you get value picks, to me, value picks are so important in the NFL. And I mean, you guys gave, let's be honest, you guys gave Kenny Pickett a D. it's hard for me to give any quarterback drafted in the first round that low of a grade because the team sees him as their franchise guy. And so I gave him a C, even though
Mr. Realist
again,
over here decides
but it's about value. It's about how are you building an entire team, not just the names that pop off on paper. And I think that's why the Steelers got graded.
It's also about his baby hands, okay? It's also about his baby hands. That's what it is, okay? It's about his baby hands.
You know what? Like AJ said, man, I root for all the players that I talk shit about. I hope they prove me wrong. Hell no, I don't hope they prove me wrong. I hope his baby hands fumble the first time he gets hit.
Go Ravens, right?
That's true.
Hey, listen,
I mean,
the Ravens could be the team that goes from not making the playoffs that one year to winning the Super Bowl. They get back so many of their own players that weren't on the field last year. Everybody talked about their secondary. Now you bring back a secondary of Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton. Like, they weren't on the field last year, and now they are. You get J.K. Dobbins. You get Gus Edwards back. This team is going to be a problem.
Don't forget about the O's. Don't forget about the O's on that
and I'm telling you,
away.
when
and
Ojabo gets back,
I
mean, he can't be more excited. He's playing with his old high school friend, like getting back with Odafe away from back when they were kids, like coming into that, going in the same stock, doesn't have to go too far away from what he knows in the Harbaughs. And Ojabo and Odafe away are going to be a problem. And then you talk about Travis Jones and Calais Campbell in the middle. Oh, stop.
I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, we didn't even mention the best player on their defense right now, and that's Patrick Queen. Like, the fact of the matter is, 8-3, Lamar MVP candidate, and then he gets hurt. And that was without Marcus Peters. You know, that was without J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and all these players that were hurt. And then now you bring all those guys back and you have a draft like they had. I mean, They own the draft because they do their due diligence on the players, and then they know what type of player fits that Baltimore system, and that system is just that kind of grind it out. We're going to do everything we can to win style. I look at the guys they drafted, just the mentalities of them. Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum. These aren't the big divas coming out of college. These are dogs, right? These are the dogs that come out and they're known for work ethic. They're known for high character guys. They just do such a good job. It's hard not to knock them. I know I went on a rant about how, there's some question marks or whatever, but overall, you're not questioning Baltimore in a schematic, in a kind of a culture environment, because they do a great job. They always have.
Congratulations, Baltimore. You have won the AFC North draft this year.
Yeah, for sure. Good draft for all four teams, but Baltimore definitely won it.